Hello and welcome to The Magic in You, where I'm here with Geraldine Moorkens Byrne, who is a Draoí or a magical practitioner from Dublin in Ireland. She's also a poet and a writer, and she teaches Irish folklore and folk magic. Geraldine also writes and performs ceremonies, including weddings, funerals, or transitional rites, and even naming events. She lives in Dublin with her family, and I am delighted to welcome Geraldine to the screen. So welcome to The Magic in You, Geraldine. Thank you for taking some time to speak to me.
Oh, well, thank you, Francis. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Delighted to hear you. So talk about yourself and your practice as well. So why don't we get started? And the first question I'd like to ask you is, how do you describe your magical or spiritual?
Now, for me, I tend to separate, I suppose, magical and spiritual. And that's probably because magically I am mainly interested in Irish folk magic traditions and would have learnt those, I suppose, long before any, I suppose, calling towards pagan or paganism, or what I would call Irish polytheism. So for me, I magically very much rooted in Irish culture, Irish heritage, the heritage of the Philly tradition, the old Irish poetry, and who occupied a very special place in society, politically and culturally, but also magically. They were very, very powerful in that regard. And then, as I say, I would be madly interested in, and what I would be very versed in is Irish folk magic traditions. And then spiritually, I'm like really just, I suppose I worked my way through a variety of things. I mean, my parents were devout Catholics. I come from like a very normal Irish Catholic background, but more and more I felt drawn towards a different outlook. I couldn't fit how I felt about things into that box. And as I learnt about Celtic Christianity, it came closer, the old original, like 8th, ninth century Irish Christianity, but it still didn't work. And then it was, I suppose, a hop, a little hop and a skip to, well, actually, don't take the photocopy, go for the original. And it was like, that was it. Everything integrated. I was home. I knew who I was. I knew what I believed. I always knew what I believed, but I didn't have to keep trying to squeeze it into a different box. I suddenly, oh no, this fits. So that is where I stand. I tend to have my spiritual practice would be separate, but my magical practice would be both would be very rooted in Ireland and Irish traditions.
So it sounds like you're almost, to use some terms that some other people have used, going back to your ancestral roots. I mean, you're Irish living in Ireland, so this is the
Yes.
original teachings, traditions that have come out of the land in which you reside and are born into.
Very much so. And I grew up, Francis, and it's probably very difficult for anyone outside of Ireland, maybe to know the complexities here of like the cultural relationship that Irish nationalism had with Catholicism and so on. So I grew up in an Ireland that felt almost that it owed something to Catholicism. And it was actually studying history where I realized we did not. In fact, that the co-opting of nationalism by Catholicism was a very late development. But people here grew up, I think, with a very different Catholicism than you'll find anywhere else. So even people who would consider themselves very normal, devout, like my parents, thought nothing of bringing us to Tara to experience Tara or Newgrange, or who told us all the old stories, who they also lived a different kind of experience. And I think that as we've matured as a nation, and Ireland has matured hugely between my childhood in the 70s and now, like 2025. We have changed and we have left behind so many of these chains and burdens and things that were imposed on us. There is literally there is no coincidence between that and the fact that people are just consistently returning to their roots, to their land, to that relationship with our people, our tuha, our tir, our land, everything around us. And through that, to the old ways or the old gods and the old way of thinking. And it is, I would call it a renaissance. We're re-evaluating everything. We can't reconstruct the past. Nobody is thinking, oh, we're doing it exactly, we're perfect, we've recreated it, but we are allowing it to inform what we do now as modern people. And it is definitely so culturally linked. And it really is, as you say, a return to ancestral roots and just listening to the ancestors and accepting that there is wisdom there. And that is extremely liberating, I think.
Yes, yes. I remember my first visit to Ireland. Now, this was back in '93, and I was Clifton in the west, and I went out to one of the islands there. There was actually it was summer, and I bumped into an archaeological student. I think he was a student at that time. So he took us on a little trip out to one of the islands. It was actually an island where there was a burial mound. There was an island where the women got buried. And he was telling lots of little stories, and one of them in particular, even so this was early 90s, was how people would go to church on the Sunday, but they'd still leave the little bowls of milk out for the hookers, and they were very staunch Catholics, but they sort of wove and
Yeah.
the traditional stuff in with, and I guess what you're saying is that Catholicism is, in a way, it's sort of like the colonialistic overtones that Ireland endured from England as well, that people don't sort of
Oh,
think.
Oh yeah. Now, I mean, you see, what happened was, I suppose, because in many ways Catholicism sort of allied itself, or the mythology went that Catholicism allied itself against English rule. In fact, it often upheld and colluded with it. But people, in a broad sense, saw, Catholicism on our side and like English Protestantism is against us. And of course, it was never, ever that simple. But, as people didn't evaluate it or overthink it. But what really, I mean, the brutality of 800 years of British occupation, we tend maybe to gloss over it a bit now because we're, as I say, this new, mature European, nation. But it was devastating. Not only, I mean, it literally broke our traditions. It broke the last great Philly schools existed under Cromwell. That's how modern they like we managed to get this far. But from the Cromwellian era onwards, you have systemic breaking of our culture, outlawing our language, the devastating effect of that. I mean, our Chonga na Shunta. There's a great saying here, Asquelga, that Tirgon Chonga, Tirgon Anam, a land without its national language, its language, is a land without its soul. And that's what they did. And a lot, though, of our folk traditions and folk magic took elements of these great old traditions, preserved them, and passed them down. So you have people, as you say, going to Mass on Sunday, and then on like absolutely that evening, they are leaving out cream for the good neighbors. They wouldn't say wouldn't be too specific. We always use euphemisms. They would be very, very careful about what they did. Our national, if you ever have a moment, go to ducas.ie and go through the national folklore collection. Put in any keyword or just read at random, and you'll have the most extraordinary stories that people genuinely they lived. They lived these stories. They knew that if they walked home at night, they had a very good, 50-50 chance that they might bump into an otherworldly creature on their way home. And they believed that. And they still went to Mass and took communion and went to confession and were buried in the rites of the church. And the church developed a kind of uneasy relationship where it had to exist beside this belief system. And luckily for us, as the power of one has waned, the power of the other is still there. We still have a chunk of this wonderful, rich belief that survived. And it survived everything. It survived being told that it's peasant superstition and being denigrated. It survived the British. It survived Catholicism. It survived all of it. And we have it now, and we're very, very lucky to have it.
Yeah, oh, wonderful. Yes, yes. And being an Irish teacher yourself, it's little wonder that you are, what is that, can I say an expert, but very passionate about this sort of reclaiming your Indigenous roots and how it's sort of incorporating and flowing through, I suppose, everything that you do these days. And it's just really quite natural for anybody to sort of getting back in touch with not only their ancestral sort of heritage, but also this connection. And this is what's always interested me, especially in relation to Ireland. It's one of these places where the connection to the land, to the wee folk, is always very strong. The portal's always there, which makes someone like myself realize that regardless of where you go, that sort of those boundaries between the realms almost sort of are non-existent, but it's just our sort of conscious perception, our reality, how we sort of block them off. So
Yeah, I think
yes,
I think that is actually very interesting. I think that, yeah, I think maybe like go back a few generations, they didn't have quite that block, definitely.
Yeah, so my own grandmother, in New Zealand, up in the blocks of the Coromandel when it was not so well developed, we talked about all the folk traditions, and I can remember when she was still alive, we still had to curtsy at the new moon, and don't go into fairy rings, which the circles of the mushrooms and things like that, and they just carried through regardless of where her family came from. But we're getting a little bit off track because this is all about you. But obviously, the next question I like to ask is like, how has your path shaped you? But obviously, being Irish, living in a land that's so filled with this also magic and connection, is for an outsider, it's quite natural that it would have shaped you. But how is that, say, as you're going through, say, the 21st century, these more ancient, older traditions, as you're becoming more and more aware of them, how do you think this has actually shaped you in the 21st century in our modern life?
I think that one of the major things for me has been realizing how much even the very, very ancient traditions of Philly, that how relevant they actually are to modern life. There was a sense that you had public responsibility. You had a duty to the people. You had a duty to your land, that you couldn't, it actually was part of life that you couldn't allow injustice, that you lost your honor, you became tainted by association if you sat and winked at it. We had, and then I suppose then we had 800 years where we were on the receiving end, you know what I mean? So you only have to look at Ireland now to know that shaped us all. We were very intolerant of injustice, I think, generally. But for me personally, I think that realization that yes, there is the private, there is the personal and the private, and of course it's important and so on. But you have a duty, and consequently you have a right to speak out. And that if you can do anything to contribute to the common good, you are supposed to do it. And something that Irish gods and a lot of people that follow Irish gods will maybe not initially, but eventually will almost certainly come around and tell you is they expect a lot. They're not interested in us. They really aren't. They don't care if your love life is going well. They really don't. And if you're there thinking you're going to light a love spell to some Irish god, really wouldn't advise it, because they will give you a lesson, you know? And it's the same with money and businesses and things. Traditionally, we would have turned to our ancestors for that. We would have turned to those spirits. And possibly as well, you could see saints kind of slipping in there, you know, and filling that role. A lot of people had a lot of devotion to different individual saints. But when it came to the gods, they're interested in your public service. They're interested in what you can do and right action. And are you of use? Are you of service? Are you doing anything practical to help? And I feel for me, particularly like as I became an adult, that gave me a purpose and a sense of, I suppose, a moral compass, a sense that actually there is right and wrong. And you can debate it and you can philosophize it, but we all know it. We all know some things are right and we know some things are wrong. We know cruelty is wrong. We know it is. And it gave me that kind of thing that always, when I wasn't sure, something to come back to. It's just that touchstone of, well, is this right action? Does this benefit? Is this of use? Or is this petty, personal, stuff that we're delving? And I think, and I see it in others too. Like, I would not claim that this is me, you know what I mean, or solely, but I think that it provides a very strong blueprint for how to actually live. And as the 21st century becomes more and more fractious and dangerous, and our democracies are under threat, our lives are under threat, the injustices that are happening around the world are hideous. You only have to look back, and there is a simple, honest to God, like, here you are, this is what you should be doing. There's no mystery. You should be speaking up, you should do right action. It's there.
Yes, and I
And
think, yeah, sorry to cut you off. I think that's something that we get so caught up, and as I'm talking about the collective we, in us, me, our individualistic needs and wants. And especially if you're walking more of a spiritual path, it's just like if you're petitioning gods, it's just like they don't care. She said they don't care. There's bigger things at play. And I like what you're saying, that it's about how do we show up? What is our service to our community as a whole? How do we walk our talk? There's other people we can say if we want, love or money or all those sort of more mundane everyday things. But when it comes to, I personally would say, sort of on a deeper soul level, how are we interconnecting with our fellow human beings and other inhabitants of our planet? Yeah, what are we actually doing? So I like this sort of right action that you're talking about, and I think more of us need to just sit down, take a chill pill, and do some really deep diving into what is our spiritual practice and how do we actually walk it? How do we show up in it? So, what advice would you give a seeker who's interested in fashions come and go, but there's always been this interest in sort of Druidism and all the sort of spiritual teaching, especially the indigenous connections to the land that Ireland seems to offer people. What sort of advice would you give a seeker who's wanting to sort of get in touch with sort of the fae folk or the wee folk, or stepping out into connecting with their ancestors who may be Irish themselves, because a lot of Irish back in the day traveled around the world. So what some advice would you give people?
that's a very big question. It's a very
I
broad
know.
question. I tell you, because, okay, taking it maybe from a little more narrow perspective of Ireland, like looking out and people kind of trying to, a lot of people want to, and it is cultural appropriation. And I know that some people are like, oh, there's no such thing. There is. I'm sorry, there is. Like, I have a culture, my practices are semi-closed. We're not really gatekeeping, and saying, oh, nobody else can have, but we are asking for respect in the taking. And I think the biggest thing you can do is approach with respect. there also is the thing, and I liken it to someone learning an instrument. And there is the really boring bit you have to do. You have to practice your scales, you have to practice your arpeggios, you have to practice your technique. And it doesn't matter. Your soul could be the most musical soul singing with the song of the universe. But if you don't practice your scales and practice your techniques, you will sound like a strangled cat. Okay? It's not going to just come to you. No matter how naturally talented you are, Paganini had to practice his scales. Okay? So that's what I kind of say to people is you have to do the boring work. You have to. You have to take a breath. You're not entitled to anything. None of us are. Irish born, we're not entitled to anything. If you go somewhere here to the land and you try to connect with the spirit of that land, with the energy of that land, and different Irish practitioners will see this or describe it in different ways. But for me, it's I see through sound. So for me, it's the sound of that land, the note of that land. If you walk in and that land, that patch of ground does not want you there, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter that, oh my God, I can trace my ancestors back to wherever. It doesn't matter. We, all of us, Irish born or someone coming from abroad or someone who has Irish roots, it doesn't matter. We have to approach with the same respect. So it's not that people are trying to gatekeep or keep it from you. It's just that we know there is a way to approach these things. You can't just reach in from any culture, pick one thing out and go, I'll take that because I like that, it's shiny. You can't do that. It doesn't mean anything. It has no power or value. You have to put a bit of effort in. You need to learn a few words of Irish. That's a great way to show respect. You need to, if you are here and you want to connect with the land, and we have people who come and they'll tell you, oh, I went here and I had this instant thing and an instant connection. And in the back of your head, you go, mm-hmm, because you know you didn't, okay? It takes time. You have to sit, you have to feel, you have to reach out and you have to be respectful. You have to introduce yourself. You wouldn't walk into a room full of people and just go, hi, give me your drink, I want to eat your food. You have to sit, you have to introduce yourself. It's little things. Take your time. And I feel as well online, there are so many people and they do, aggrandize their experiences, and someone is there and they're plugging away and they're trying for like a little glimmer of connection. Someone else is there going, oh, the Morrigan came to me last night and she told me I am her chosen one. And they're left there going, well, bloody hell, I've been like trying for a year and a half to feel any connection. Listen to me. They haven't. It isn't. That's not how this works. You are doing the right thing. And many people try for years to get like a connection. It takes time. There's nothing wrong with that because you are learning so much along the way. It's not a competition, it's not a race. And just take so much with a grain of salt. Your hard work, your slow work, that's actually far more culturally acceptable to the gods, to the ancestors, to all of them, far more than someone rushing in and having I had like, big, big experience. Just go
I'm
easy.
la I'm laughing because the Morrigan or the Margaret, she's such a complicated deity, or even what I've understood of her. And
Yeah.
if she came to me, I'd be running for the hills. If she
Yeah.
said, "You're the chosen one," I'm going, "Oh no, 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 I'm not. Just choose somebody." Just
Oh, listen,
oh,
like I regularly tell people I keep my head down and I don't volunteer. I don't volunteer for nothing. Like all these people who want to be, the Grand High Poobah, and I'm like, I'm over here. I'm not volunteering. I only do what they make me do. You know what I mean? It's when you get the whack up the head and you're given no choice and you're fine. But, as a general rule, I'm that soldier in the army who doesn't volunteer for anything because you don't know what you're getting into. You really don't.
Read the stories, really read the stories. And it's like they're not just made up, though, so just read them. And yeah.
Yeah. And
And that,
that's another thing as well. And I just, if you don't mind, I'd love to just put this in here for
oh,
people is I know a lot of people, their introduction to the Irish sagas and the gods and all, they tend to be through writers like Lady Gregory. And these they have to put in context. These are not Irish sources. These are ascendancy sources. These are people who had, like, they lived in Ireland, they had a love of Ireland, but they very much saw the Irish, as peasants, superstitious, stupid, you know what I mean? They took our literature and they sanitized it and they repackaged it and they told it the way they thought it should be told. And a lot of people will tell you, oh, I know the story of, whatever. And you're going, you actually don't. There's so much available online now, actual translations of the actual literature. If you want to read a modern translation, like the Táin, for example, the great Irish poem, which is one of the most famous ones, we have Kinsella's version, we have Heaney's version. You don't. We have great, great versions. Step outside the Gregory Yates matrix. You know what I mean? Just put them into context. That is not really Irish. Step away and go for native Irish translators, native Irish poets, and go for academic translations. And you will realize that these are mad tales. Like there's contradictions within contradictions, and you're not meant to understand all of it. You read it through, let it wash over you, get the sense of it. Harder than reading Gregory's version, but much more rewarding.
definitely, yeah. I want to circle back to something that you were mentioning about connecting in with the land and like listening to the songs and the music that comes out, because this is sort of a nice segue into your latest book that I understand is about to come out next year, which is all about the sacred music. I'm not even going to insult you by trying to pronounce the title because as we've discovered when you appeared on Reawakening the Sacred Self, I completely, I'm going to say bastardized that, and I do apologize once again. So
No,
I'm going to give you now the platform for you to talk about this wonderful book because it's all about what you were just saying. It's about connecting in with that musical, lyrical connection with the land and with the magic.
thank you. The title is Draocht Ceol. Draocht means magic and Ceol means music. So the literal translation is music magic, but it's more than that. It is the Irish folk tradition that uses sound. So music, humming, non-lexical words, all kinds of things, lilting. And also it's the tradition, the belief that you can connect into the magical energy. So again, as we were saying earlier, like we don't, and in Irish traditions, you really do not have this tradition of raising like some kind of magic through gods. That's just, it's not really a thing. What was the cornerstone of belief and is for many modern practitioners is that every place has energy. And it's just natural, wild, magical energy. And you have Brie, which is the energy of wild places, and Bua, which is the energy of man made places. And then you've a lot of places that are a mix of both. And every place there is like a song of the land, and every place has a sound and note. And Draocht is a very wide subject, but it starts with literally being able to understand the land, being able to connect to that magical energy by using yourself in a way as a tuning fork. Like you sit there, you listen, you feel the note, you keep going down through the layers of sound. When you hit the true note of a place, and it doesn't matter whether it's a wild place or your own bedroom, you can either take that energy in, and then that's a stock. A stock is inside. It means, and to come inside, it means everything that you take in, listening, meditating, all of that. And in Draocht Ceol, the word amach covers what you emit, the thing you bring out, the energy you take out. And it means to come out. So for us, you sit, you tune, you hear. And then you literally open your mouth and let it out. And that amok attunes you to the land, to the sound. And that's a very, very old practice, a very ancient practice. It's not unique to Ireland. You'll find variations of it in most very, very old cultures and indigenous groups. But in Ireland, like music and sound was held to a degree that you just do not find in many cultures. So it developed into this very rich tradition from that, from this idea that you can literally create magic through sound. And in then we have the three strains of magic in music. We have Galtry, Gantry, and Suntry. We have then different strains of magic in word, in poetry. We have magical poetical forms. We have all these things, and then you have out of that there's more and more and more. There's a whole body of knowledge on literally how to use sound energy and sound magic. And Draoí, the book, takes what I've done is try to start at the beginning, explain it from its earliest roots, bring the reader through to the modern time, but also give lots and lots of exercises to so that as you're reading it, it's not just dry academic, oh look, and then this happened. There's lots to do as you go through the book. What I'd love is for people to come out the other end and go, I can actually attempt this, I can build on this. And it doesn't matter so much what your magical practice is. You can incorporate this into it, or this can become your main practice. It's one of those things. But I think I hope it will give people, a connection to that really powerful magic that we use. And it is sound magic. It is Draoí.
Mm, mm, mm. Sort of like taking the magical practice or the connection to the land, to weaving those two aspects together, which is something very sort of important. Where I live in Australia, sort of the Aboriginal peoples have this, what they call Dundiri. It's this deep listening to the land, and this is where sound originates from. So coming back to your book, when will it be available?
It will be out April 28th. 2026. There are pre-orders for the paperback on certainly on Amazon.co.uk. I believe the American ones will be out soon as well. And for anyone who wants to go a different route, like obviously as it comes closer, it'll be released in bookstores and you can order it away from the online giants.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be available throughout. And I have a TikTok channel called Draoí, and that like I am building up just a body of like little videos and stuff to help people along the way, and that and other Irish traditions. And there's a class at the Irish Pagan School called Draoí as well, and that covers the basics, the introduction to it. Obviously, the book goes into a lot more in depth than that, but that's a good kind of introductory lesson. But there'll be a lot of free stuff, as I say, on the TikTok channel as well.
And I'll put all the links below it, and
Oh,
including the link to your main website in relation to all your ceremonies and the other books you've written and the other things that you do. And before we go, Geraldine, there is something else coming out next year. You've got a podcast about witchcraft, magic, and activism.
I
So
do.
this is sort of like, I suppose, wouldn't be surprised if people are listening our chat today, because you've sort of talked about how important it is to walk in right action. So has this been one of the underlying influences for your podcast? And how important do you believe that really anybody who's walking a magical, even a spiritual path, should put these things into action, especially when it comes to activism, righting the wrongs that we're
I
seeing in the world?
I I personally can't understand spiritualism or spirituality without action. I think yeah, if you're spiritual, and you don't care about what is happening politically, morally, socially, what you're actually about is yourself. You're interested in your own self and your own person. You that's not spirituality to me anyway. And maybe that will put people's backs up, I don't know, but I really do feel that. The podcast is very heavily influenced by, I'm running a kind of class at the moment, a free class for people who are interested. And we have a little group and we talk a lot about how to be a modern filly, how to take those principles that they lived by and the duties that they performed, and how to bring some of that into modern life. So out of that, really, the podcast was born, because the big question for season 1 is, we have creativity, we have magic, and then we have activism. What is your intersectional moment between those? If you are a creative person, if you are a magical person, what are you doing to make the world that little bit better? Now, I'm not even talking about people walking and waving placards, because there is that too. You know what I mean? That is very valid. But I'm talking about, like, if you're helping someone in your own community, if you're doing something in your local community, that is activism too. So it's that crossover between all of these things. How do we be of use? And how does our creativity and our magical practice and our spiritual practice and everything, how does that inform it? And how do we use it? So Draoí Ceol, the podcast will be called The Sound of Magic, and it will be out hopefully in the new year, very early on, January or February of next year.
Wonderful. And again, it sort of ties in with everything that you do. And what comes to mind is that this is what I see in a lot of spiritual communities that I'm involved with. I'll basically call it spiritual bypass. So, and it's disappointing whenever we're sort of talking about or escapism. It's like, and this is going to upset people, when they're talking about the new world, the new earth, which is all wonderful, but we're here. And it's just like, it's like the Elon Musks who say, oh, let's go and live on Mars and the moon or whatever. It's just like, why? Because we've made such a mess of it of our own backyard. It's just like we're not learning any. So to me,
Yeah.
as a magical practitioner, also someone who's very spiritual, it's coming to walk your talk. What are you doing in the here and now to not only benefit or improve your own self, your own soul's evolution, but that flows out. So we need to think that we're not isolated. We're all interconnected. And yes, the more that
Absolutely.
and you said, an activism doesn't mean necessarily running around with placards. It could be picking up rubbish. It could be choosing whether you buy pre-packaged vegetables, and this is what I'm noticing in my own supermarket, or the loose kind. It might be taking your own bags to the supermarket, washing
Everything.
a full load in the washing machine as opposed to half a load. Simple little things like that. And we can get on
It
the
is. And
bandwagon.
no, it literally nodding away here, going, absolutely. That's what it's about. And I think as well, there's almost like a pushback at the moment against activism. Oh, well, I'm not political and I don't. And you go, do you know what? That's not something to boast about. That's not a flex. It really isn't. Honest to God, we all should be angry. We all should be pushing for a better world. And you can do that through kindness. You can do that through gentleness. But there's room as well to do that through, being a burning brand and a fire, get out there and shout. There's room for everything. But you do have to ask yourself, are you doing the bit that you could be doing? Or like, what are you giving back? It's like, why are you? Like, what is your purpose? So for me, like, as I say, I don't volunteer. If the gods want something, like, I'm at the back going, no, no, head down. But every now and then you get a kick. You know what I mean? You get told what to do and you get told where you're meant to be. You step up and you do it. Because otherwise, what are you and why are you? What is your purpose? What use are you? We all need to remember, I think, that, we're big into our spirituality and everybody wants to reconnect with the old ways. The old people, the old ways were very practical. It was about surviving and getting by as a community, It wasn't glamorous, it was practical. So maybe we need to bring a little of that back.
Yes, yes, I do like the sort of like earthing, earthing our spirituality is what I call it. It's like it's got to be in the here and now. We're on this earth plane. Unfortunately, Judy, we are running out of time. This is a discussion that obviously we could be chatting on for the next couple of hours. It's so fascinating. I am really looking forward to not only your podcast, but also your book for coming out next year. So if people, and I know I've got the link below, what else do you have available on your website apart? And maybe talk a little bit more about the ceremonies. And you talked about the Irish school. Anything else that you do?
Well, I do about 6 classes, I think, at the Irish Pagan School, covering a wide range of things. The ceremonies are very dear to my heart. I do perform ceremonies, but a lot of the time, what happens, or my sort of specialist role, if you know what I mean, seems to be when people want, because I don't fall into a lot of the categories. Like there's a lot of people that come, they want a kind of a Wiccan light kind of thing, and I'm not a Wiccan, and I don't, you know what I mean? I do not truck with these things. So I tend to get the people who want to express themselves, but they haven't the words. And they might want to perform it themselves, and they might even want a family member to do it, but they need someone to help them write it. So I do a lot of that. As I say, I do perform ceremonies as well. And that's always a privilege. Like that's an amazing thing to be part of. And more, there's a lot of people looking for what I would call transition ceremonies, movements between stages of life. Obviously, then gender transition and things like that. But a lot of people who are moving on from relationships or who feel that they're ready to let go of the past. And that seems to have become an area for me, like it's something I'm very drawn to. And then when I'm not doing that, I write murder mysteries and poetry. So, yeah, a mix of things.
And they're all on your website,
They're all on the website.
celebratingbirths.com, which is listed below. Geraldine, it's been an absolute delight to have this opportunity to chat with you. And I'm taking it that if people want to get in touch with you further to know updates about your book and the podcast, either on your website or TikTok.
Absolutely.
But thank you very much for talking about the magic in you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, friends. Always lovely to chat to you. Really. And I'm really looking forward to interviewing you for the podcast. So that's next as well. So
Something that everybody can look forward to next year. So thank you again and blessings.